That's really peculiar because all of the that if you see the panel at all, you must be authorized as a whitelisted user. Otherwise, it wouldn't show you the. Well, there's two things. Okay, it's all good. It's amazing any of this ever works at all. Okay, so you are seeing the drop down now. Let me switch back to the spectator main. Okay, so choose a camera from the list. Don't do chase because obviously that's what we're already in. Oh, you're seeing the panel without the drop down. That's really confusing. Is there. And you're running the HTML and the JavaScript for the extension is in the same hosted test environment? Because I do have. Oh, let's see. Maybe you're in an environment where there's um, ports are being blocked or something. So in the actual extension, the only reason I can think that's happening is if you're not getting access to my WebSocket server on the ports that it's. So this is important. The WebSocket server that the extension uses is robertsmania.com, and the port is 4430. So if you're on a client on a network somewhere that can't get to 4430, I could imagine that that would be the problem. If and this is a little bit where it breaks down for me in terms of my understanding of the way the environment works. Um, the HTML and the JavaScript ends up running on the client wherever they are in the world, but the content is hosted at Twitch. I think that's correct. So if you're on a network that blocks unknown ports like that, 4430 is not a standard port. And if this is a deal breaker, I can look into working around it. But the truth is, I didn't want I think the typical port for WebSocket secure traffic is 443, and I wanted to have it be a different port so that I can redirect it to a computer that's running just this extension rather than having to do any traffic. Okay, good. Okay, so you see the drop down and stuff now. So I guess that shows that it's working for that case where a user doesn't have access to it. It'll still just show the it'll still just show the information panel. It'll only get the drop down if it's successfully communicating with the WebSocket server. And that's kind of intentional so that if I'm not broadcasting and the WebSocket server isn't okay.
Okay,
there we go.
extension
Look at that.
user. Set camera to gyro.
Okay, now you should have, as far as like the user interaction should go, the button should have said working while she was talking about the command, and then it should have switched to a 90-second cooldown for you. And the way I have the cooldowns for the systems that PitGirl works with on my stream is the system typically gets a 60-second cooldown when anybody changes it, and the user who made the requests gets a 90-second cooldown. So the goal isn't to be punitive with the cooldowns at all, but it's really to just make it so that no one user can monopolize the system and or troll it or constantly spam requests and stuff like that. So when your when your timeout finishes, let me know and we could do another test just to demonstrate. Like if I change the camera with a PitGirl command, then your button will still say send, and you can try to send it, but she'll say that it's not a good time or that the cooldown is still there for the camera system, and then you'll get like a 10-second cooldown. There's a couple other edge cases that we could test that I could demonstrate for you when we're not in a good system. So like right now we're in the game and we could change cameras, but there's lots of other times when we're watching replays or we're at the static screen or I'm in the garage or something like that, and you couldn't change the camera anyway. So if you make a request through the extension, then it goes through the same interaction where she says that it's not a good time for PitGirl commands and then usually lists out why it's not a good time. But again, you get like a 10-second cooldown at that point. So the intention isn't to be punitive, but it's to make it so that somebody can't just spam it repetitively when it's not a good time. Does that make sense? So if you want, let me know when you're finished or when your cooldown, your 90-second cooldown must be almost finished now. And when that's the case, we can change the camera through the chat command, and then you could try it again and see that the cooldown's being respected for the camera. Okay. The only other thing I would say is right now she acknowledged you as extension user, and that's the default case when the user hasn't granted privileges to the user. So if you did click on the little person at the bottom of the extension and grant the permissions, then she would actually acknowledge you and say, Bazooka Dave, when she does the command and stuff like that.
Set
See, there you go.
chopper.
And it manages the cooldowns based on the opaque user ID. And I don't want to get into the technical stuff about it, but awesome. Splendid. Thank you, Bazooka Dave. I really appreciate that. My next step is to run with this extension for a little bit and see. The goal is to sort of onboard viewers into using PitGirl commands and stuff. Because it's been honestly a little disappointing sometimes where new people come into the stream, they'll see the cameras change and stuff like that. If they type in just !PitGirl into the chat, it gives this whole wall of text of like all the commands and the cameras and stuff you can do. And I've seen over and over people try like one or two commands and either there's a typo or they forget the exclamation point at the beginning or whatever, and they don't work. And then those people never try it again, and it's really sad. So my goal with the extension is to make something that's more accessible, that should just work. And then if people get comfortable with it or curious about the other commands, there's replay and checkout and other stuff that we can do with PitGirl as additional features and stuff. So thanks for approving the extension. I really appreciate that.